So tonight we have Denise Lawrence, that we know her as Sister Denise, and she is currently living in the south of France. And I've known Denise, I don't know how long time, and you know, any bio that you put for Denise is always going to sell her short, because she's been involved in so many different aspects of spirituality. So I'm going to do my own little bio here, and that is that I think the thing about Sister Denise, she was the first soul in the West to take Baba's knowledge, which is quite an amazing thing. And her main teacher was Dadi Janki, but she's also, you know, she also learned Hindi, so she's had access to Indian texts, talking to seniors fluently. So that journey has allowed her to imbibe spirituality in a way. She's got the East and West, she's got the Western psychology, but she's got the Eastern spirituality. She's a researcher. You know, if Baba says Link in the Murli, Denise is going to research it. You know, if Baba says diamond, Denise is going to watch a video or go to a diamond mine to find out what Baba is really talking about here. So this is her skill, and also that ability to articulate spiritual concepts in the way that are easily able to we're easily able to understand. So there's much more that I could say, but I'd rather hear you on this topic. So Sister Denise, I'm going to actually spotlight you so that when I come off camera, everyone sees you. And yeah, you've got half an hour to share on this topic, and then I'll come back on and we'll have a little chit chat and see if anyone has put anything in the chat. So okay, half an hour.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. Yeah, it's amazing. We go back a long time, and so much water under the bridge as we are, you know, classmates in this sort of invisible university of spirituality, the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University. And I've always liked the idea that this is a university. And I remember when I was in university, where I was studying literature and philosophy, and we had very small groups, and I liked the small group. They called it a seminar, like with about 8 or 9 people. So everybody was really involved. And I like that process of interaction. When you have a huge university, and we have about 1 million students, still you have this possibility, because it's centers all over the place. And since COVID, we have been creating this new format of Zoom, which is, I really like it, actually. For many years, I was thinking we should just go online, and then we can be together with whoever wants to be there, which is really nice. So this Raj Yoga is study and practice, and there are some key words in the teachings, and these key words are quotations from Indian spirituality, from Hindu bhakti of centuries, and people know these phrases, but they don't necessarily go into the depth of what they mean. Whereas Baba does do that and encourages us to take up these phrases and go into the depth to find out why they're so important. And this one about freedom and independence is connected with a phrase which is two phrases really, which are in contrast to each other. Liberation in life and bondage in life. So bondage is something that devotional people are very conscious about, especially in India. There is this idea of karmic bondage. We know the philosophy of karma. And of course, in Brahma Kumari's Raj Yoga, we learn the philosophy of karma in a much deeper way than most other people do, which is very, very interesting, because then we can really see in our own lives how our state of freedom and independence is connected with our mentality, with our karma, with our perception, with our sense of what it means to be me. And we have learned, on the one hand, there is the self who is a master of our own story. And at the same time, we are bound in destiny, which is another kind of bondage. But at the same time, also, there's the idea that you can create your destiny or recognize a very high destiny. So it can be quite deep, quite complex, quite subtle. You can understand this on a simple level, but why we are still studying it after 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 80 years, is because as we continue to study and practice, we can go to deeper layers and discover paradoxes and deal with the paradoxes. So this one is, I think, particularly interesting because I think a lot of people are completely unaware of the things that limit their freedom. And we need to, first of all, become aware so that we then can have the option to do something about it. And if we want to do something about it, then we need to know what the options are. So one thing is we are limited by karma. It's a limitation, and it's also a huge arena of opportunities, depending on how you interpret it, how you work with it, how you handle it. So we are born according to our karma. And so there may be some accounts that we have with our parents, our relatives, a particular country, a particular group of people in the social context. And I always interpret karma not as something that is a punishment or a reward, but more like, okay, if I have been doing different actions that come from a place of personal weakness or lack of greater understanding, then it is an arena of lessons. And Daddy Janki, who I learned a great deal from, always used to say that life is to be a student for your whole life and to have an attitude of learning. So whatever is taking place in our lives, there's always something to understand from it, to learn from it, because the purpose of everything is to take us forward, to make us strong, and to make us experience. No other purpose.
Yes.
So in that case, there is often a tendency to feel that if something is difficult or unpleasant, then its purpose is to make me feel bad about myself. But no, that's conditioning, social conditioning. So we have to always remember that the purpose is not what we have been conditioned to think. The purpose is to carry us forward. And this conditioning is itself something that takes away our freedom. So as we grow up, we are taught by parents, teachers, religious authorities, various things about ourselves, which are designed to make us feel guilty, bad, insufficient, inadequate, etc., because the idea is that if you praise a person, they'll get too arrogant, which is not necessarily the case at all. It's a belief. But what a lot of people do is they internalize these messages, which are put downs, and that itself is a bondage. And so if that is the case with you, you need to recognize it and to see how external voices have given you a message to diminish yourself and to not really realize your potential and to give up easily, this sort of thing, or to allow yourself to be used, or I'm only, or I'm just, this kind of expression will come out. And this is because of social conditioning and not really a spiritual reality. So these are a type of thing that we have to recognize. When we hear ourselves speaking like that, we need to raise a red flag and say, wait a minute. According to God, I am a pure, powerful, peaceful, loving, blissful being of light. And I have all kinds of rights. And that's my identity. I have a role to play. I have a brilliant destiny, etc., etc. So these are messages that we receive from God through the Murli, through Brahma Baba, which are saying, honor yourself, who you really are, understand who you really are, and that some of these messages of social conditioning are to be disregarded. However, they have been deeply internalized. So disregarding it is work, because it's a mental prison. And coming out of the mental prison means that you have to really think and look at these contrasting voices and decide for yourself who you're going to listen to. And the old conditioning voices will come again, again, again. And just as often, you will say, no, I am a pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful being of light, and I am good. And good people make mistakes. So obviously we make mistakes and then we learn from them and then we get on with it. But making a mistake doesn't make you a bad person. In fact, from the angle of God, all of us are his children, all of us are wonderful, but sometimes we look like cartoons as we do these wonderful behaviors that he says, wait a minute, wake up, see what you're doing, be true to who you are, because one can forget oneself easily enough, because people around you will project onto you and reinforce those original social conditioning messages. And so you really have your work cut out to neutralize them and disregard them as they come thick and fast. I think one example that shows up the extreme danger of this projection is the trouble people have on social media, because they get so worried about public opinion and they have to be a certain way, wear a certain thing, whatever. Absolute slavery to public opinion, which is the most unreliable of all sources of information. Now, you need to know that. It's very, very important to realize that it's totally unreliable and fickle. Keep changing. And if you let yourself get pushed around like a leaf in a storm, then wake up and realize that you're not that. And you are important. You must honor yourself. And so we hear about the different stages that a person passes through during the time cycle. We hear about the big world drama of 5,000 years, in which everything starts off golden, pure, perfect, empowered, and gradually, as you pass through many lifetimes, you become depleted. And now we are at the confluence age, which means everyone is depleted and everyone is all tangled up with each other in terms of karmic accounts and bondages, and also in terms of having internalized incorrect information about the self, about the ways of the world, about your value, about what constitutes a valuable person. And all of this is called materialism. So if we take this word body consciousness, materialism, karmic bondage, and this kind of imprisoned state of being, it's all the same thing. And it's not anybody's fault, it's just the effect of time. So one has to release the idea of I did bad, therefore I am bad, and change that to I have had many lives, I've passed through a long time, and I became depleted. This goes in direct contradiction to the idea of progress. And the idea of progress is what everybody is raised with and educated with, and in spirituality, people believe they've been evolving over many, many years and many lifetimes. And then God says, what are you talking about? How can you be evolving when you've been losing all of your essential spiritual energy just by living? Because the soul is an energy. And as long as you're doing something, you're using that energy. And the energy of the soul is vast and gigantic. And each soul has a different intensity or degree or quantity of energy. And you have no idea. He does give an example of a battery. You charge your battery and then it works well. But when your battery is dead, then whether it's a big battery or a little battery, all batteries are equally dead, which means that you don't really know how much you can charge up. And you don't really know who you are when you're depleted. It's really once we start meditating and taking in that spiritual energy from God, that you realize, in a sense, how depleted you have been, but also you realize how much you can take and just keep taking. So once we are in the confluence age and we're regularly meditating, then there are energies going on which have not been going on before we started this. So this is quite important to understand about, because once you start to draw energy from God, the battle begins. And so he says, you are spiritual warriors, and your enemy is not other people. Your enemy is the forces of negativity or darkness, you can say. So what are the forces of darkness? You can say negative emotions, self-doubt, unclarity about what's true and what's false, what's real and what's not real, who you really are, all these things. There can be confusion. You apply your you could say your morality to situations in the confluence age, and it doesn't pan out very well. You really can't do that because your morality is based on public opinion over many, many centuries of different major religious traditions. That's where morality comes from. And instead of that, you have the concepts that God gives us, you see. And very often people don't quite notice the extent to which they will take on board the knowledge, and little by little you see the contrast between knowledge and not knowledge, and you will have both running together for quite some time, and they are in opposition with each other. And that opposing set of ideas, which you don't really notice how much you are operating on the basis of two mutually exclusive ideas about what's real, about what you are, about how to function, that creates a lot of disturbance. And also, in addition to that, once you start this practice, you also begin the process of settlement of karma. And so every so often you will find yourself having a really bad day and you won't know why. And so in regular way of thinking, you'll think, oh, you have a really bad day, you must have done something to do that, or how terrible it is to have a bad day, or this is a bad day, I can't do anything. Maybe you will allow it to get you depressed. But the knowledge says there will be bad days. And when a bad day comes along, what do you do with a bad day? Is you say, this is circumstantial. And so when you have a bad day, everything will go wrong. And so therefore it means you have to be patient, you have to be tolerant, you have to be flexible, accommodating, slow down, let it be, get through it, these kinds of things. And so a bad day is not really a bad day. It may just feel like a bad day, but it is a day which obliges you to activate these characteristics, these qualities and powers of patience and accommodation and being flexible and being okay with it and get through it. And that it doesn't mean you need to beat yourself up. It doesn't mean anything bad about yourself. It is just simply you have to pass through a bad day because it's good for you to develop these strengthening characteristics. And if you didn't have any bad days, you would remain too weak. And so you realize that something that feels like a bad day may actually be very good. And so you use your power of recognition to understand that. And then you are a little bit freer from good and bad, positive, negative. And instead of being caught up in it feels good or it feels bad, your focus is I am doing my spiritual practice in a spectrum of varying circumstances, all of which contain some opportunities for me to develop myself. So what that means is you need to be very self-centered. And this word self-centered in normal morality is like a bad thing. But actually, if you are self-centered in the sense that you're focusing on yourself and your purpose is to interpret everything that's going on in such a way that you improve, you develop, you acquire resilience, you acquire competence, because the most important person in your life is actually you. Now, your conditioning may be different to say the most important person in your life is your loved ones. If you're a wife, your husband. If you're a mother, your children. And especially women are conditioned to feel that everybody else is first and they are second. And you don't have so much value in all of this. So there are discrepancies in conventional social attitudes, which are based on preconceptions that have no foundation in any kind of spiritual law or anything. It's just perception. And it creates bias. And so your study in spirituality is to become a lot more sensitive to the different biases that there are, and to not take these biases personally, and not take them as something bad. It is what it is. And you are going to assert yourself, who you are, regardless of the prejudices or preconceptions or whatever, but you will not take that in and take that on and do to yourself what other people do to you, even if you may have a tendency to do that because of years and years of social conditioning. So Raj Yoga helps you to be aware that your duty to yourself is to undo that. Your duty to yourself is to honor yourself. And you are not your body. You are not your gender. You are not your color. You are not your education. You are not your job. You know, people say, I am a carpenter, therefore, or I am a mother, therefore. No, I am a soul. And I do this and that and the other for my livelihood, but that's not my identity. My identity is I'm a spiritual being performing a role in a circumstance which is there, full of opportunities for me to explore myself and explore how I handle myself in adverse circumstances. It's easy to handle yourself in circumstances that are very positive, but a lot of the time circumstances are adverse. And you need to remember always that adverse circumstances contain messages for developing your different kinds of competencies. Can be life skills, it can be how you feel about yourself, resilience against things which make you want to give up or get depressed or feel sad or sorry for yourself or something like this. Because when we start having negative self-talk, that really drains out the spiritual energy. So what Raj Yoga says is, if you're going to do this, meditate, study, then don't do things which go against it. And of course you will, everybody does, but notice when you're doing it and to stop doing it. You know, you can stop doing something against yourself at any point in time. And then you also need to notice habits of thinking which are negative and turn them around. So the study gives you a huge number of ideas to work with about the self, about your interpretation of what's going on around you, such that your thinking about yourself and about what's going on remains meaningful and positive. And then you are much more likely to do positive karma. You are much more likely to be on top of things. You will not have a problem in your meditation, because if you start doing a lot of negative self-talk and then you want to meditate, then that self-talk will go rushing into your mind like a tsunami, and you won't be able to have a spiritual conversation that is uplifting. It'll be, oh, woe is me, or why is this happening and why is that happening? And when something like that happens, refer yourself to some sentences in the study that strike your mind, that are uplifting, that ring true to you, and work with those sentences to such an extent that they actually drown out the negative self-talk that was wanting to take over. And don't give up on that, because these habits of mind have been there for centuries. You know, you're an old soul, and you've been around. You've been male, female, different cultures, different kinds of work, different levels of society, all sorts of things you have been. And you have accumulated all sorts of mental habits based on sense perception. Something looks bad, therefore it is bad. Something feels bad, therefore it is bad. It looks good, therefore it is good. So this reliance on sense perception to determine whether something is real or unreal, or good or bad, that's the deception. And that sits in the soul as a bondage and makes us do karma that supports that bondage or intensifies that bondage. And on the other hand, the study and practice of Raj Yoga will flag it up. You'll notice it. You'll say, hey, self, don't do that. Don't go there. Stop now. And turn. There's no point doing a 180, because every 180 is followed by another 180 and you go back where you were. That doesn't work. You have to turn gently, just like if you're turning a boat in the sea. A very big boat needs a lot of space to turn. So you are also a very big ship. And this is a symbol for life. I'm a ship on the stormy ocean and I'm going somewhere, but don't go the wrong place. You want to go to the right place, which is really self-honor, self-awareness. And so just turn yourself gently until you're pointed in the right direction and keep it up. Do not try and do these practices too intensely, because you won't be able to keep it up. So when I was starting this, I was trying to figure out, okay, with what intensity should I be doing this so that I can actually sustain it indefinitely? And I decided just arbitrarily, I will make a spiritual effort 4% more than what's comfortable. So just a tiny bit, because if you just do what's comfortable, you'll slack off. If you do too much, you won't be able to keep it up. So I figured just like that, 4% was good. And it has stood me in good stead, because, you know, even after 50 years, it's still going. You know, you go through so many things, so many stages, so much terrain. And if you can still carry on, that's really good. So I will stop there and turn it back over to Margaret. Thank you.
There's a lot in there, but there's it's like you've taken us on a journey, but I'd like to kind of go back to the beginning and to, you know, you talked about honoring ourselves and you know, this starting point that we are good, because in a lot of religions it's you're not good, you know, you're born through original sin, your starting point is not good. So I just wondered if you could just kind of share a little bit about because what's happened is, you know, you talked about how we've deeply internalized these things that we don't even know that we're walking around thinking we're not good.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, I have one thing to my advantage, which is that I'm really not religious. And so I was saved from this message of you're an original sinner, because I used to really think about these things as a very young child. And I used to think that that doesn't make any sense. And I remember thinking particularly, okay, at the end of the world, there'll be everybody will be taken out of their tombs. I mean, what kind of condition will they be in? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. What is going on here? There must be something else. And so I've always had this thought that the religious teachings are not being interpreted as they could be. It's too gross, it's too physical, and I don't buy it. So I thought, okay, I'll make my own version of it, and that'll be fine. And I won't listen to these people because they say something, they do something else. That also doesn't work for me. So yet what for me was the equivalent was the social conditioning. You know, I was the first child in a family which believes in firstborn sons, and so as a girl, you missed being a boy, and so that was a terrible mistake right there. And I thought, you know, guys, I have all the capabilities that my brothers have, and I was bigger than them when I was small. Now they're bigger than me, but you know, there are so many biases that are going on in regard to your position in society or education. They never prepare a girl for a career, because they say, oh, you're just going to get married and you have children and then you'll have some guy and he will do whatever he wants. And I said, that doesn't feel like my destiny. So I really need to understand things here. I need to get myself a good education and make myself independent, because that seemed logical. And I didn't want to be, you know, a housewife, a mother. I just didn't correspond with what I felt I was designed for. And so I didn't have, I didn't buy into it, but I didn't really have enough information to be able to stand my ground in pretty adverse circumstances. So when I started learning Raj Yoga, it did provide me with the mindset that was needed to come out of that and to become free and independent from all of that socialization and the biases and all of those things. And I really give a lot of importance to the study, because everything begins in the mind. Now, there are a lot of people who talk a lot about feeling and heart and all of those things, and they're very important, but at the same time, the ideas are, they don't change. It's a good day, a bad day, people love you, they don't love you. The ideas are not affected by that, but the emotions are. And so I always thought that emotions are wonderful, but you're again liable to the ups and downs, which really drain your energy and confuse you and so on. So I really liked ideas, but the difficulty was to find ideas that are tenable, that are coherent and consistent, and that make sense to me. So I was researching these things as a teenager, lapping up all kinds of literature and looking at all the different religions and seeing what they were all saying. And so I was really very well ready when I encountered Raj Yoga to get right into it. Mm-hmm. And so that was very good. And, you know, I always believed in reincarnation, because I thought one life, that's not long enough. I need tons of lives because there's so much I have to do here. And I just cannot imagine just you pop in and pop out again and that's the end of it. No, I'm here for good. And I need to understand the meaning of it all, and my relationship with the earth, my relationship with ancient civilizations and so on, which I always felt very much. I traveled fairly widely and I felt a connection with all kinds of different groups of people that were other than the group of people I was born into. So I think that one does need to follow this deep inner sense of self, this deep inner intuition. And I was a pretty argumentative type, so as a person growing up. And then, you know, when people would tell me this nonsense, I would just argue endlessly about it. So in that sense, I was never walking around thinking I'm bad, but I was definitely walking around thinking, all these people are, they don't know what they're talking about, but I need to know. I need information, and I don't have it, and I want it, and I have a right to it.
That's it. So it's almost like it's not necessarily conscious; it's unconscious, isn't it? A lot of this is unconscious, and I'm just wondering, because you mentioned self-talk. Is this whole game self-talk? You know, whether you're moving through a lovely scene or adversity, is it literally what you're allowing your mind to do? Is that the whole game? Is it all self-talk? But whether that self-talk is, you can go into very elevated self-talk or you can go into negative self-talk. Is that the whole game?
I think it may vary for different people. I'm a person who is very much, I live with myself, you know, so I talk to myself a lot about everything. And, you know, when you learn Raj Yoga, you learn about 3 separate sections of consciousness, which all work together. You have your sanskaras, you have your mind, and you have your intellect. And when I was growing up in my family, everything was intellect. You know, if you had a good intellect, that was great. And I had an adequate intellect. And I always used to think of the mind and the intellect as the same thing. And because in English, you think of your mind as that which is processing ideas. And you don't really use the word intellect for that. You might be an intellectual, but it's really the mind that's important. And then sanskaras, I learned this word when I came into Raj Yoga, and I wasn't much interested in personality traits or things like that. I was very, very interested in right and wrong. I was very interested in doing the right thing, but the criteria by which you do the right thing has to be figured out. So, you know, I would study the Russian classics, the French classics, the English classics, social conscience. All of this was of great importance to me, more than religion, to determine what is right and wrong, different kinds of philosophical angles on this. So that kind of self-talk, but then the self-talk that is negative is when something bad happens to you as an individual, especially as a very young person, from the angle of psychology, a very young person is the center of the universe. So if something bad happens, it's always your fault. And so that can begin a set of self-talk where you're always, if something good happens, it's because you did the right thing. If something bad happens, it's your fault. So this is something I think a lot of people have. Other people may have a self-talk that's more concerned with image and being successful. It varies a lot. You know, the kinds of people that there are in this world is just so varied. And ultimately, nobody knows you like you know you. And I think people do project on each other their preconceptions. And I know a lot of people would project things on me and view me as something that to me was nothing like that. What are you talking about? How can you see me like that? I'm not even close to that. And these are the kind of preconceptions and filters that people are conditioned to acquire. And it makes life very complicated because of that. Prejudice is something that really needs to be looked at. Racism, gender bias, religious bias, national bias, all of these biases. And I grew up with a lot of that because I had a very mixed type of background, family, and so on. And there was a lot of prejudice around, which I thought was completely bizarre. And I never bought into it, but I was surrounded by it, you know.
Actually, there are some questions that have come in. One is, does the soul have a distinct memory of our deep intentions and purpose? And can this become obvious in life?
Well, I would say it does, but it's very deep. And to my way of thinking, before you engage in Raj Yoga, you are looking for answers to a lot of people are in that mentality, which leads them to Raj Yoga. And this is because there are deep memories. And when it's time for you to find yourself, these memories will precipitate to the surface and they will push you in the direction, you see, of finding the answers that are important to you. And you do become very concerned about, well, who am I and what am I and how do I find out and what is this? What's going on? Why is the world like this? Why is life like this? I need to make sense of it, and I need to honor my sense of who I could be, should be, might be, or am I crazy? You know. So I do think that yes, there is.
And often adversity opens up doors, isn't it? Sometimes adversity creates a kind of stops you in your tracks and you can't go on the way you are, and it opens up a search or wanting to understand why this happened or whatever. So, you know, adversity plays a great part in the coming into the spiritual journey for many. There's another one. Yeah,
I think it definitely does. I think it triggers these memories. Because as long as everything is nicey and everything is going along fine, you don't question it. But all of a sudden, some bomb falls on your head and you say, what's going on? And you really start to look at your life and look at yourself and look at what's going on and say, I need answers.
Mm. Another question, what does the soul take with it when leaving, going to the next life? I think, is it karma, knowledge, experiences?
Many things, really. Your next birth is said to be according to your karma. And you'll also hear the great importance given to your last thought, because your last thought becomes then the first thing that you do in your next life. And so if your last thought is very elevated, this last thing you do is a very important karma that dictates where you go. I mean, you also do have destiny, and the two play together in a paradoxical relationship. You do take your sanskaras, your life experience, your talents, your propensities and tendencies. You are a being who is in continuity. And so the kind of person that you are now, that's the kind of person that you will be then. And there are modifications, of course. And in one way, you can be like a long playing record which has 10 or 15 songs on it. And when you finished one song, then your next life is another song. So you can be emerging different characteristics. Every time you take a new birth, you will change gender. You may change culture. You may change language. And then that place where you get born will activate the sanskaras that correspond with that place. It's really quite complicated, but in a sense, everything is already in you. And in another sense, the bit that plays out as your current role will be triggered by karmic accounts, circumstances, time, many things. It's quite a complex equation.
It's amazing how time has flown by, but you did, I would like to mention, because you mentioned about honoring yourself, and I really like this, what you've said just now about that, life, you could see life as a series of songs, and in a way honoring yourself is a little bit like dancing to your own tune, isn't it, to really know the self and everything. So I don't know if you can use these analogies and take us into some kind of meditation for the next 7 minutes or so, 7 or 8 minutes.
Okay, definitely. So slowly, gently, let yourself go inside. Position yourself on the inside of your face. Your face is a mask that you're using in this life. But behind the face is that being of light that you are. It's not a man or a woman, it's a being. There's a mind, sensitivity, a heart. You have seen all of humanity, all of history, over a long period of time, many births. You don't remember it, but it's there, deep down within. As you go inside, you become more conscious of your core, this special individual being that you are. that was hidden from view for so long, but which is slowly making itself known to you. That, yeah, this is me. Pure being who has an extraordinary destiny, a role to play which is significant, meaningful. You have a great contribution to make to the atmosphere, to the feeling around you, because you belong, connected to the source. And as you go deep inside, you feel connected. Because you are in that space where that one is. You left behind the superficial things to go into that inner space. You feel your essence. You feel that connection with the One. And you know that you live with that One through all the seams. And that One is showing you to yourself. You are valuable. You are here for a higher purpose. Everything that has happened, good and bad, has been to carry you forward and to connect you to your essence. Just allow it to happen. Just be there in that space of connectedness. This is a place of honor. Always know that you are connected and that that One is with you at every step. So take your steps in remembrance. Move forward quietly, secretly, meaningfully. Shanti.
Thank you very much. Seems like such a beautiful thing to take time to honor the self, isn't it? Raj Yoga is really about honoring the truth about the self. It's so easy, but in one way, and in another way, it's because you've got all these internalized things. As you said, you have to just keep going, no matter what comes, because it's all there to take you to your essence and move you forward. It's quite beautiful to see it like that. It's not there to put you down, or, you know, it's only there for sort of soul empowerment. That's it, really, and to express the best of yourself. So thank you so much, Sister Denise, for, you know, giving us time. I know your life's busy. I know you had a program earlier on and probably some in between. I saw you on ones. I was cooking and listening. So every day she's on Zoom everywhere. So, but many souls are benefiting, which is really, truly wonderful. So,
Margaret,
thank you. So just